Wander Wealthy Podcast, episode 199. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Wander Wealthy Podcast. My name is Tess. I am the host of the show, founder of Wander Wealthy, and your business coach, here to share with you how to build your amazing, life-changing, can't keep the clients away from you money coaching, financial coaching, wealth coaching business. Today, we have a great show for you. I'm going to be sharing the 3 core ingredients to run a full-time coaching business in part-time hours. Originally, I was thinking about sharing basically how I've built and run my financial coaching business that gives me and provides me a full-time income while working from abroad. And that ultimately means that I just don't work the same hours as most of my clients and all of that good stuff. But given the times that we're in, 2020, the year of the pandemic, although the pandemic has not ended yet. But given the times, not everyone is really thinking about taking their business abroad, especially if you're still back home, wherever home is. And I also know, and I also think that this episode is going to be super helpful and relevant for people who don't plan on taking their coaching business on the road, that don't plan on being the digital nomad, so to speak. So I thought what it would be more appropriate to talk about is how I am able to run a full-time coaching business that makes full-time income while basically working part-time. So that's the roundabout of how I got here and what we're going to be sharing or discussing today. Some of these things will be totally relevant if you do plan to, take your business on the road, take it abroad, or stay where you are and just cut down your hours of working. So I can't wait to dive in. I'm going to share these 3 core ingredients. Of course, there's other ingredients, but I think these are the 3 that you have to master in order to really gain control over your time and your business before it tries to take control of you. And you're going to come out of this episode feeling really good as long as you implement these things. So before we dive into that, let me just introduce you to this week's sponsor. Now, typically, I'm a broken record, and the sponsor is my signature program, the Wealthy Coach Blueprint. But we have closed down enrollment this week, which means we're kicking off the blueprint with so many amazing money coaches who are ready to take 2021 by storm. And we're doing that January 4th. So in the meantime, what I do have to offer you is our lovely handy-dandy online coaches pricing workbook. If you are sitting there trying to rack your brain at what sort of price to sell your services at, especially if you're new, even if you've been in the biz for a while, this workbook will take you through the nuts and bolts of how to create a price for your services, and even maybe for like digital products or whatever you have, that is really rooted in what you need financially, right? So many people just throw a price at the wall to see what sticks, or they'll look at competitors and try to price off of that. And that is the wrong way to do it. So this workbook will teach you the right way. You can purchase it for $27 at wanderwealthy.com/workbook, or you can get it for free if you go to the podcast, this podcast, Wander Wealthy, in the Apple iTunes store. Make sure that you are subscribed, but also leave us a rating, 5 stars if you love it, and a review. So you can do that in the iTunes store, I believe, or on your Apple Podcast app in the Apple Podcast player. Just make sure you're subscribed to the show and then leave a rating and a review. And all you have to do is take a screenshot of your review when it is officially posted. Now, keep in mind, it can take a couple days for iTunes to process it and post it. But once it's posted, take a screenshot and email it to me, tess@wanderwealthy.com. And once I confirm that it has been posted, you can also take a screenshot before you submit it. But I will have to wait and see it be posted, and then myself or one of my team members will send you a copy of the Online Coaches Pricing Workbook for free. Otherwise, you can purchase it, wanderwealthy.com/workbook. All right, let's dive in to how you can ultimately run a full-time money coaching business on part-time hours, or from abroad. So let me go ahead and frame this episode and the lesson you're going to be learning from the episode by sharing a little bit of my story and ultimately why I got into business for myself. If you don't know my story, like the full story, you can check out episode 164 where I share how I became a money coach. And in that, you'll learn that I did not quit my corporate job and become a money coach right away. I had more of the craving to become an entrepreneur and a business owner. And then I kind of stumbled on money coaching through lots of trial and error. But backing up to, one of the ultimate reasons, or I guess these 3 reasons why I quit my corporate job and wanted to get into business for myself were because I was craving what I call the 3 forms of freedom. Those are time freedom, location freedom, and financial freedom. Now, I should probably add this disclaimer before I dive into what was really pushing me to pursue these 3 freedoms, in that I recognize that I was in a very traditional work environment. And so I'm still dealing with some of these limiting beliefs that I have that other people, because this is something my dad would totally say to me, is like, oh, you're just a lazy millennial. You don't want to show up to work on time, or you don't want to have to go into one workplace. And I recognize that. And I also recognize that there's a lot of privilege baked in here to be able to choose that I don't want to do this and I'm going to go create a different reality for myself. But I also find it really fascinating that the millennial generation and Gen Z have these tools. And I think we're also just programmed because we grew up with technology as opposed to having to learn technology. We really grew up with it. And so we're way more adaptive to some of these tools that allow us to build a business, for instance, or allow us to make money in ways that our parents could never have even imagined or dreamed of making, or allow us to, really make work look different than how it's looked, generations before us. So I wanted to preface that because I think on one hand, you can look at this as, oh, you just want to be able to work whenever you want and from wherever you want, like how privileged and also how lazy of you. It kind of on 2 ends of the spectrum there. But also I choose to look at it now as, no, the truth is because of technology and even some of the easiest ways of accessing technology, whether it's through your phone or having a computer, you can create a business where you can work whenever you want and from wherever you want, and you can make great money doing it. So just a little preface with these freedoms that we might crave. And I think a lot of people crave these. So first off, starting off, time freedom. For me personally, I was so sick of working 60 to 70 hour work weeks and really knowing that I wasn't working enough compared to my colleagues. And so I felt this ongoing pressure of having to work more to prove myself when it just was like a never-ending kind of moving needle, and that needle was constantly increasing. And I was just like trying to measure up, and it felt really unfulfilling. And I did technically make more money the more I worked because at my level, I was getting paid overtime. But I also knew that working more, especially like in a week's time, adding more hours to your output does not increase the productivity of an employee or of an organization. So this really frustrated me and it really infuriated me, and it really, I think, led to my burnout. And I just so desperately craved to be able to have control over when I worked and how many hours I worked, and not worry about constantly being measured up to my colleagues. And, I have a very specific memory where I was reprimanded for not working 100 hours a week because my manager at the time, that's how much she worked when she was my age and at my level. And that just pissed me off. So that was one of the biggest things that motivated me to build my own business, because I was like, this isn't living, this isn't life, and this is not what I want, and this is not what I want to be working for. So time freedom was huge for me. Another one was location freedom, because honestly, I desired to work from coffee shops. I desired to work from home. I desired to have that sort of location flexibility. And I also desired to travel and be able to live and experience and spend time in different countries. And when I looked down the path of my job, the further I advanced, the more I saw the need for me to stay in one place. And that just didn't align with really the life that I wanted to live and lead. And it's so funny because I remember at the time, for me, in my worldview of really only being surrounded by fellow Americans, fellow corporate Americans, it was this mindset of, well, you just have to suck it up. This is just what life is. And now it's so interesting because of the fact that I do live abroad. I've surrounded myself with different people from different cultures and different mentalities that I've now sort of adopted this mindset that more money and having like a higher status, if you will, career is not the end all be all. And that's such an American kind of mentality. I'd love to know if you would disagree with me, but from my perspective now, being outside of America, that is such an American mentality. And when you travel, you do see that people so much more they're neither living to work, right? Their work doesn't like make up their life. I think there's like a couple different meanings that you could boil down from live to work, but they also don't have to work to live, right? They have more of a social and financial safety net in terms of being able to support themselves financially or have the government support them or their family support them. And that's something that we definitely lack in America. But then also, like, if they're going to work, it's so much more either tied to their life's work or they don't take it that seriously, right? It's not building this career that they hate. That's just, they wouldn't, and I'm definitely generalizing because I do know some who work to build a career that they don't like. And that's such an American mentality that's kind of festered over. But honestly, like, you don't typically find that in at least European culture. So anyway, that has completely fascinated me. And the ability to live outside of my home country and my home state and then also have this flexibility to kind of work from anywhere has really changed my life and my mindset around work. And the final one is financial freedom, which I think is also interesting because for me, my drive to build my business isn't to get rich. It's just to be able to make money so that I can live my life how I want to. And that doesn't, like, I live a fairly simple life. I don't spend a lot of money. And so really that boils down to, I just need to be able to make enough money so that I can work whenever I want and so that I can live wherever I want. And that is enough for me. That is enough to make me feel like I'm building a business that allows me to live the life that I want to live, as opposed to building a business that completely controls me. So I think that's really interesting for me to reflect on. And as I think about my business and my financial coaching business and now my business coaching business and really like the why in terms of the freedoms, of course, I have a bigger why in terms of the impact I want to make and the vision I have for this business and how it's going to change lives. But in terms of the selfish why, like why do I do this for myself? Those are definitely the things. And it's completely changed from, I think, even when I started, and especially from when I was in my corporate job and pursuing a career. For a long, long time, I was after the financial freedom. And now I realize that I don't have to exchange financial freedom for time freedom and location freedom. I can really have it all, but I also feel like I've found a really nice balance where I'm not just constantly pursuing the next carrot that's in front of me, especially when it comes to the money stuff. So financial freedom for me actually means more choice than it means more money, right? The choice to be able to work as much as I want so that I can actually spend more time on my passions outside of work and my interests outside of work, and the choice to be able to run my business wherever I want so that I can pursue my love, my husband, who is not an American, who does not live in America, and therefore I needed to get flexible. I need to be able to take my business abroad. So that was a long kind of intro story. And I hope that something from that really resonated with you and you could maybe see something that you're either struggling with, or you can resonate with some of those goals and those desires that I personally experienced when I was in my 9-to-5 especially. But the truth is, when I quit my job, a lot of the reason for why I actually didn't start pursuing these 3 freedoms was because I didn't have a lot of clarity around where I wanted to go next. I really quit my job to pursue these 3 freedoms, but then I didn't know how I was going to do that. And that kept me held back quite a bit. So I initially avoided starting a financial coaching business specifically because I was not sure if it was sustainable or if it was scalable. And I worried about that time freedom. So because I was pursuing time freedom, but I thought, well, financial coaching, I'm going to have to work with so many people and be on 10 coaching calls a day in order for me to make my financial goals so I can pursue financial freedom. Well, that's just not going to work. I ended up really hindering myself from pursuing financial freedom and time freedom because I avoided starting the business with the fear that they would ultimately also keep me from pursuing financial freedom and time freedom. It's such a chicken or the egg scenario, if you can see this here. I also avoided taking any part of my business abroad or taking it on the road and pursuing location freedom because I was playing the game of, well, if this happens or when this happens, then I will, instead of just, I'm going to take this risk and I'm going to make this happen, right? So I was like, well, when I figure out my business and start making $3,000 a month, then I'll take my business on the road, instead of deciding I will take my business on the road and I will make $3,000 a month as a result of it or at the same time. So I avoided starting my financial coaching business because I was worried about the time commitment. I avoided taking it on the road because I didn't think it was possible, and especially avoided taking my financial coaching business abroad because I was super worried about the time zone. So then I hindered myself moving a lot earlier. And ultimately, because I avoided starting and believing it was going to work, I also hindered myself from that financial freedom. So it's funny how our thoughts and our avoidance and our doubt just helps us self-sabotage. And it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, is that if you choose to believe that it's not going to allow you to reach your goals, therefore you don't pursue it, then you don't ultimately end up reaching your goals. So some things that I was definitely lacking in order to help me see that it is totally possible to run a financial coaching business from abroad or in part-time hours. I was really lacking, first of all, a good understanding of what a value-packed money coaching program looked like that supported me in, first and foremost, increasing my prices or allowing me to scale. So here's the deal. If you need to make a full-time income on part-time hours, and let's say you figure out how you can make a full-time income on full-time hours, that means you're working with X amount of clients. Now, if you need to cut your hours in half so you can make the same amount of income but on half the hours, you either need to cut your clients but increase your prices, probably by double, or you need to scale your program, the way that you coach, so that you can work with more people but remove the time commitment on your end. So this is probably most likely going to look like some sort of group format and maybe eventually just a passive course format. Now, the problem with a lot of coaches is they will skip to this point, assuming they can't make a full-time income one-on-one, or assuming that that's not sustainable, which it definitely is. But they will basically, what I like to call, trip over the start line And then they'll try to go straight to the group program or the online course program. And because they haven't tried and tested it in a one-on-one scenario with lots of clients going through their one-on-one program, their program isn't as effective or they're not as confident in it. And so then it still doesn't sell, or it doesn't sell consistently and time after time after time. So that's why in the Wealthy Coach Blueprint, we always ensure that you're creating a value-packed one-on-one program first and foremost, and then learn how to either scale it or how to make sure that you can price it appropriately so you can make a full-time income on part-time hours if that's the work that you want to be doing. So the value-packed program, of course, was a big thing I was lacking. I was also just lacking the understanding of what a solid financial coaching business model looked like and how it could effectively scale so that I didn't have to work a 40-hour work week, so to speak, but also for me personally, because I wanted to live abroad, how I could deliver financial coaching, making full-time income, and not having to work 40 hours, or at the very least, not working the same time zone. Because for me, I was always between 6 and 9 hours ahead of my clients, and I didn't want to be working in the middle of the night. So it was really hard for me to wrap my mind around, especially before I moved, that I was just continuing to cut myself off at the knees and not pursue financial coaching because I just assumed it wasn't going to work. The last thing that I was really lacking was the mental strength, right? The ability to work through all of these limiting beliefs and trust that I could do this, that I could make this work. So I didn't have a plan. I just ultimately, for me, had to do it. And I got to the point where I didn't really have any other choice. I eventually moved to Europe. I was pursuing a handful of different things, but I also was pursuing my money coaching business. And I then hired a coach who really helped me with my limiting beliefs and helped me see that, okay, I'm just going to take on as many clients as I possibly can. And then when we get to the point of max capacity, then I'll figure out the next step. And that was the permission I needed to really pursue coaching full time, even though I was working an entirely different time zone and I didn't necessarily want to work full time. And it ultimately worked for me because I just did it even though I was doubtful, even though I had fears of it not working out, even though I was somewhat holding myself back, I still woke up every day and pursued it. And I think, yes, it worked out. I got the results I was looking for. Here's the deal though. It took me a lot of time and I had to work through a lot of discomfort. And if I could have taken a shortcut, and let's be honest, there's no shortcuts, but if I could have collapsed the time that it took to get the results that I was finally looking for, I would have done it in a heartbeat. And that's really what we offer our clients through Wander Wealthy and in the Wealthy Coach Blueprint, is helping them, take those limiting beliefs, set them aside, work through them while also simultaneously building your value-packed program, showing you how it's possible to scale, but also making sure that you're focused on the one thing that you really need to be focusing on, which is usually the next step. Don't skip to step number 8 of this 10-step process of building your scalable coaching business when you don't have the coaching business foundation set up yet. And that's, getting back to tripping over the starting line. So I had my own internal doubts. I didn't have the foundation set up in any way. And so again, it just took me a lot of time, a lot of trial and error, and working through those inefficiencies to finally get to where I needed to be. However, what I learned and what I now teach my clients inside of the Wealthy Coach Blueprint is essentially boiled down to these 3 key ingredients that you need if you want to build a full-time coaching business on part-time hours or take it abroad. So, are you ready for the ingredients? Finally, 25 minutes into this recording. Let's do it. Don't worry, we'll blast through it. The 3 ingredients are boundaries, a scalable program, and faith. Okay? I know it sounds simple, and that's because the ingredients list is technically simple. implementing them is the hard thing. So boundaries. This is my favorite word of 2020. Boundaries. What are your boundaries? Boundaries are a funny thing because we as people will have certain boundaries and then that we respect, and then we'll have other boundaries that we don't even have, or we just completely neglect. So you as an aspiring or as a current money coach, I bet you have financial boundaries, aka some sort of budget or money management system or savings plan. A budget is a version of having boundaries for yourself, right? And we all, because we are like the money nerds, there are certain expenses that might make us uncomfortable, right? Or that we just like wouldn't spend more than, I don't know, $10 for 2 chicken breasts or something like that. That is my favorite example because that's how much it costs in Switzerland to buy 2 chicken breasts. It's insane. But we have some financial boundaries in place of how much we will allow ourselves to spend or how much we will spend on a certain thing. Those are our financial boundaries. We have relationship boundaries, right? You might talk about certain things with your family that you wouldn't talk about with your friends. You might talk about certain things with your friends that you wouldn't talk about with your family. You might talk about certain things with your partner or do certain things or behave a certain way because there are boundaries within those relationships. You have material boundaries, right? You have your space. Maybe you're someone who follows Marie Kondo and you organize and minimize and, you just have a boundary for what you are willing to acquire and what you're not willing to acquire. And some people are more strict with their material boundaries and some people are less strict with their material boundaries. We have personal boundaries, both emotional and physical, and we have time boundaries. And time boundaries can apply to lots of different things, but you can really leverage them for business and building a productive and lucrative business in a time threshold that you set for yourself. I always like to think of the Parkinson's law, where we will fill the time we give ourselves. And that's something that I have reminded myself. So I used to spend a full 40 hours plus per week on my business, and I was not making very much money at all. And now I struggle to spend about 20 hours per week on my business. Obviously, when I'm in launch mode, it's a little bit more, but when I'm working, just normal with my coaching and keeping the content updated and all of that, I, work hard to hit 20 hours, like not to try to get it below 20 hours, but try to hit 20 hours. Like I'm usually getting up there and then it's the end of the week. And that's because I've implemented some pretty strict time boundaries. And I've done it in a way that doesn't necessarily feel strict, but I've also understood that I don't need to feel successful because I worked 8 hours a day. What allows me to feel successful is that I can make good money working less. And so I started by just giving myself 6 hours a day. And I was like, if I hit 6 hours of work per day, I am doing good. And then now it's usually closer to 4. And that's how I got to my 20-hour work week, is like, I just know that if I hit 4 hours of work per day, or that's how much time I give myself to get certain things done, that I'm going to get it done in the hours I give myself because of Parkinson's law. However, it's technically resources, right? So you can use Parkinson's law for money, you can use it for space, or you can use it for time. So money, if you give yourself, or maybe not you because you might be thinking about this, but if you gave someone, maybe your child, if you have a child or you can think of a child, if you gave them $100 and you're like, here's your money for the week, whatever you have at the end of it, or maybe it's a month, maybe that's more appropriate. I don't know. I don't have kids. But giving them $100, most likely they will use up that resource without the desire to have some left over, because maybe they don't know what's going to be left over or what happens to that leftover money. So they just use it all up. And we're just likely to use the amount of money that we allocate to ourselves. We use up the resources that are given to us. Same with space. If you have a bigger closet, you're much more likely to fill it before you think about, I should really go through and get rid of some of this stuff. So we're much more likely to fill a bigger closet. If you have a smaller closet, you're probably less likely to continue to acquire more, or you're going to more frequently go through and clean it out so that you can make space for more. When it comes to time, right? If you give yourself an amount of time to complete an assignment, you will use that entire time. If you shrink that time, you will use that entire time. That's also like lends itself to procrastination and how we will do things at the last minute and we'll still be able to get it done compared to someone who might start it, days before. So boundaries play a role here, and for your business, you can set these time boundaries for yourself. Now, there's other ways that I've been able to make this much easier and more effective for me as well. And I do this by leveraging, because I am abroad, I leverage the time difference to my benefit in order to help me block and batch my projects and my tasks. So I use time blocking and batching. Time blocking is where I actually go into my calendar and create huge blocks of like an event. I'll do like a 2-hour block, and then I will categorize what I'm going to be working on during that 2-hour block. So for me, typically, I already have kind of like a predetermined block in my calendar where, for instance, Monday morning, I am typically doing my content creation. So I always know that I'm going to be doing my content creation Monday morning, and I have a couple of hours blocked off for that. And then I'll go in and I'll set more specific goals for that particular Monday of what I want to get done. What I'll also do is, because I leverage these large blocks, I will also do something called batching. Batching is where you do basically a very similar task and you kind of knock it all out to try to keep your brain focused on the same type of work, right? It eliminates something called context switching. So let me give you an example, because otherwise I don't have the vocabulary to explain it without an example. So I create a podcast, and I create a weekly podcast. But what you may not know is that I batch the creation of my podcast. And there are, for me personally, because I don't do the editing, my editor does that. For me personally, I break it into 3 main types of tasks. Okay, so the 3 types of tasks are creating the notes, recording the podcast, and then doing a little bit of the admin work, like uploading the podcast to my Google Drive folder and pulling in the photo and all of that stuff. That is just like it takes hardly any time, but that's something entirely different from creating the notes or recording. So when I talk about context switching, if I'm working on the podcast, and first I do the notes, then I go and record, then I go upload the task, and then I start the next episode and do that whole process, I'm context switching, because I'm going from notes brainstorming brain to then recording brain to then all the little admin stuff brain. Instead, when you batch, you take, the next 2, 3, maybe 4 podcast episodes, and you work on them all together. And what I would do is I would batch the notes part. So I would write the notes and do the brainstorming for all 4 podcast episodes before moving on to the next thing, which would be then I would batch the recording, and I would record all 4 podcast episodes before moving on to the next thing, which is all the admin, like doing the uploading the graphic, naming it, whatever else needs to happen for my editor to be able to take it and edit and do the rest. So that's what I talk about when it comes to batching, and having big chunks of time set aside so that you can batch makes it also very easy. This is also just so much more efficient because, like I said, when you context switch, you lose about 15 to 45 minutes every time you switch the type of task that you're doing, because your brain takes so long to readjust to the new thing that you're working on. So it just is a lot more efficient to be able to do that. Plus, I get basically... Sometimes I'll work on it in 2-week batches. So that's what I'm doing now because we're bumping up to the holidays. Sometimes I'll work on it in a month. So I'll do a full month of podcasts in one day, or in it could be over the course of 2 weeks, because usually I'll do the notes and then I'll do the recording and then tack on the admin batch later on. But I can get a lot of my content created in a very short amount of time by time blocking when I'm going to do it and then batching what I'm going to do during that time block. So that's a little kind of trick for you. And I actually talk about this more in detail in episode 170, so you can go check that out. But I also mentioned, I leverage the time difference to my benefit. So everything else I do, I schedule my calls, for instance, all in the afternoon. So I just don't take calls in the morning, so I can really focus on my, themed content creation day, right? My themed time blocks and then batching in the morning, and then a lot more of my calls and admin work can get done in the afternoon. I also do this for like the days of the week. Again, episode 170 will take you through those details, but that's how I've set boundaries, not only for like my weekly schedule, when I work, when I don't work, but also how much I'm working on certain things, so that I can make sure that I'm leveraging Parkinson's law to my benefit and just giving myself the time, the resource of time to get a certain thing done. The other thing I think, and the last thing I'll talk about with boundaries, is that a lot of people are worried about clients and being able to work with their schedule. And I always use this example of a doctor, right? When you make a doctor's appointment, the person in the front office is usually like, okay, the doctor can see you 2.5 months from now, Tuesday at 10 a.m., right? That's not necessarily the most convenient for you, but you make it work. And as the coach, it's not like you're going to be that inconvenient, but you and your clients can find something that works for the both of you and that works within your boundaries. All you have to do is stick to your boundaries. So for a long time for me, I did work Sunday evenings because first of all, I didn't mind it. I would take Friday afternoons off so then I could open up my Sunday afternoons. And that's usually, especially for clients who just like could not possibly meet with me during the week, that's when we would be able to meet. This isn't usually a problem for people who live in the same time zone as their clients, but for me, it was what I wanted to extend. And so when I had Sunday afternoons available in my scheduler, my clients would pick a Sunday afternoon for us to talk. However, when I shifted to working more with business owners, I knew that they had a little bit more flexibility, most likely during their week. Now, still, some of the coaches that I work with inside of the Blueprint have a full-time job, but they're willing to get on the phone with me before the work day starts or maybe during their lunch hour. And so that's what I have available for them. And I noticed that sometimes I would have a Sunday open and a client would book that if it was available. But when I started deciding that I'm not going to take calls on Sunday, and so then I had just the other days of the week available, they would make something work because they're paying for you. And I think this is hard for early coaches to really wrap their mind around, is like, well, I need to make it convenient for my client. And the reality is, they're paying for you. They see this as valuable and they want to fit into your schedule. And of course, you might have someone who falls out of that and you can identify what's going to work best for you and come up with an agreement there. But for the most part, when you set your boundaries, no matter what, when you set boundaries, people respect them. Right? It's when you don't set boundaries that then people are disrespecting to them. But when you set boundaries and you say, this is when I'm available to talk, you be surprised. It's way less likely that you'll actually get people that would fall outside of those, that would disagree or that would fight you on that. You might have some, but those are always the outliers. Average, a majority of the time, people will make it work if you set the boundaries, if you tell them this is what's going to happen, okay? The second core ingredient is a scalable program. So this is obviously something we teach you how to create inside of the Wealthy Coach Blueprint. I'm very proud of it because I was lacking this for so long and it was such a big frustration point. And when I was touching on this at the beginning of the episode, when we talk about a scalable program, you either need it to be scalable in price or scalable in people. So remember, if you want to take a full-time income coaching business and do it in part-time hours, you either need to be able to cut down the number of people, and if you're going to do that, then you need to increase your price, or you need to cut down how much time you're spending by removing yourself from the equation or slightly removing yourself. You can still keep it very personalized and very hands-on, but you can still slightly remove yourself while keeping the price the same, if not also increasing the price, which also happens just the more demand that you get and the more results you're able to showcase. So when you have a scalable program that you're able to scale either by price or by people, that's when you're really able to take down your hours, knowing that you can still deliver the results to your clients who are going through the program, or you're able to, move abroad and work a little bit of a different, wonkier schedule. And when I say results, I think that is the most important. And that's where I do caution people to jump to a scaled program already, right? You can build a scalable program that you start out as one-on-one so that you can ensure that it is the best program that you could create and it's really getting your clients results. And then because it's built on a scalable foundation, you can scale it from there. But it's not going to be a scaled program, right? It's not already scaled. It's still one-on-one until you do eventually scale it up. Once you see that your process works, your clients are getting results, you have people coming back for more, you have clients referring you, and you're hitting your revenue goals, and then you can start to think about scaling beyond what your one-on-one and removing yourself from the process. The last ingredient for being able to do this whole thing, your full-time income business in part-time hours, is faith. It's faith. I know it's not tangible. It's not a tangible ingredient, but it is the most important. And I say faith. I think a lot of people would also say, mindset, having a strong mindset around your beliefs and what you believe is possible for you. But the truth is, so often because I just shared with you my story and how I stopped myself for a long time and how it took me a long time, we'll stop ourselves before we even start. Remember, tripping over the starting line. So I remember when I had the opportunity to move to Europe to live with my now husband, then it was my boyfriend. And I remember telling my friend in a coffee shop that I just didn't know if I could continue doing money coaching. Like maybe I'd have to switch and do something else in order for me to move. And really, I was just constantly, like I said, I was chopping myself off at the knees, not even giving myself the opportunity to explore what a money coaching business working with US clients or North American clients could look like from abroad. So I didn't know how it was possible. I didn't know if it was possible. So I just assumed it wasn't. But for whatever reason, like I said, I just kept doing it. I kept waking up and pursuing it no matter what. And then eventually I got the confidence that I was just going to take on as many clients as I could until I couldn't take on anymore. And that is ultimately what allowed me to reach the milestone of building a full-time financial coaching business, and has then prompted me to move and evolve to help other money coaches do the same, because it really was hard for me. But honestly, I do think that I had faith. I just didn't know how to leverage it and how to bottle it up and how to mix it with the other core ingredients that really allowed me to get to this point. But when I'm talking to my clients now, today, I always bring it back to faith, because they're following a process, right? The blueprint is a process. There's lots of other business building processes out there, and they're following it without seeing the results for themselves right in the beginning. When you first start something, like nothing gets you immediate results. We get pretty quick results, I won't lie, but you still have to, in order to take action, you have to have faith that like what you're doing today will reap some benefit and reward tomorrow. Otherwise, if you need the proof, if you need to see it before you can believe it, then it's not going to work, because you're just not going to see it. You have to believe that it's there in order to do the thing that you need to do to actually see the results. And that's what faith is, right? If you believe in God, if you believe in source, if you believe in angels, if you believe in manifestation, if you believe in some other higher power, then you have faith. You have faith in something else, but you can also have faith in your future and in what you want to create in your business. And that's something that is so important to have as you go through this journey. And I guess the good news is, faith defined is a strong belief in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual conviction rather than proof, right? Whatever your religion might be, it's the strong belief in the doctrines of that without having actual proof that they exist. You just have faith that it's there. And you have to have that at the beginning of your business. And the good thing about this is that eventually you do get proof. Now, I might argue that even with proof, it still takes faith to keep going because we always think it'll get easier, it'll get better. And the truth is, your problems don't go away. You just get new, different problems. And faith is what you really need to just keep going, to believe that it's there for you, that it's going to happen without seeing the proof yet, just based off of conviction. So there's definitely religious, spiritual faith. There's also entrepreneurship faith. And that is the third ingredient to being able to build a business, period, but also be able to get to a point where you truly can build a business that allows you the time freedom, that allows you the location freedom, and that allows you the financial freedom that you're looking for. So I'm going to leave you with that. I hope you resonated with my stories, and I hope that you can see these core ingredients and start implementing some of them. I would love to hear from you if you have questions or comments about this episode. Go to Instagram and send me a message. I'm at Tess_Wicks. If you want to get the show notes of this episode, head to wanderwealthypodcast.com/podcast/episode 199. Next week is our 200th episode. I cannot wait. It is New Year's Eve and amazing things are going to be happening. I'm sharing 20 big lessons that I've learned in the 200 episodes and over my 4-year career of building a financial coaching business. And, to wrap up 2020, I mean, how many 2 zeros can I get here? But I'm so excited for that. If you want to grab the Online Coaches Pricing Workbook, you can get it for $27 at wanderwealthy.com/workbook, or you can get it for free by making sure you leave this podcast, a rating and a review. Do it in your Apple Podcasts app or in the iTunes store. Find Wander Wealthy, make sure you're logged in with your Apple ID, leave a rating, leave a 5-star review. We love those. Make sure you're subscribed. Take a snapshot of your review, send it to me, Tess at wanderwealthy.com, and I will get you your copy of the workbook. All right? You go have a wonderful holiday season, and until next time, I hope you wander wealthy.